Let's start with general troubleshooting. First off, troubleshooting can get more complex, within Service Bridge. First off, beyond the application itself, which could have troubleshooting with some of the things that are going on with it, it is also connecting processes. I mean, Service Bridge is a framework, if you will, to, in a lot of cases, to connect different processes. So, you might have a process that's within the instance that you're connecting to that might be causing challenges. And this is especially prevalent when you're looking at things like remote task definitions, because let's say you have an incident-to-incident integration, you are going to create an incident on the opposite side. There could be a business rule, there could be data policies, there could be other things that are blocking, that parent incident from actually being generated, that are unique and specific, not to Service Bridge itself, but to the incident table on the customer side. So it's something to keep in mind. There is the troubleshooting of Service Bridge as an application itself, but there also is the potential for there to be troubleshooting of just the business rules and the logic that an instance has on a particular table, especially when we're talking about remote task definitions. So within the knowledge base, there is a specific KB article. Let me sign in and I'll pull that up. That is dedicated to Service Bridge troubleshooting. And so that is updated, on a regular basis. They're constantly adding things as there's new known issues or there's new troubleshooting steps. So that ideally this should be the first place that you or a customer is going to go to for getting information on how to troubleshoot the Service Bridge. And so a lot of the information that we have actually comes from there, trying to highlight what are the high-level items to focus on. So here is the KB article itself. And so you'll see this is the troubleshooting guide. There's a lot in here. We're going to go over a lot of this actually in some of the subsequent slides as well. It goes over logging, what are the different jobs and debug properties for RPS. And then down below, we have additional links. So onboarding, troubleshooting, what are the common issues that we have there? Some different things on different error states for resolving outbound statuses. So a number of KPIs. So I would just say, just from a general perspective, this is the place to start, as it really has a lot of information that goes in depth as to how to do and perform troubleshooting. The other thing that we wanted to highlight, I brought up the article earlier, which had the community post, the community blog about the migrating between instances for Service Bridge. There is also this industry community page that has a forum, and we're trying to drive more communication and interest, but from a customer as well as internally to here, so that we can start getting, I think I'd say, is the catalyst of people having conversations and trying to answer questions in here. So we can really start building a community around it to be having discussions about not just issues that maybe they're having, but other things that they're trying and exploring. We have, the forum itself. There's in the blog is also other location that we are going to be posting some articles that maybe are things that are not necessarily out of the box, but are giving some guidance on how it could be addressed. Work note synchronization as an example. Not something that is there out of the box, but we have, these are the business rules and some of the scripts that could be used to add that functionality onto it. So just want to call that out, especially for customers to be able to see some of the information that we'll be posting there, best practices, as well as troubleshooting or asking questions within the forum as well. So first thing, beyond the articles themselves is the Service Bridge error log. So in 1.1.0, this was in the February release, there was a centralized error log module that was added. And so you'll see if you're in an instance underneath Service Bridge, there's an error log module. And so that is really is being built, will be continue to be enhanced as there's additional errors or problems that they found, to be able to centralize anything that could be from a related to Service Bridge coming into one location. So the first thing to look at is going to be the debug properties for logging. And so these are the properties. So you'll see, logging is turned off by default. There's transport logging as well, which is turned off by default. The default level is going to be to informational, and the features being logged are going to be all. The first two settings properties should be there within sys properties already. These other two, the last 2, 3, and 4, they are not going to be there, which means that they'll just be going to their default level. And if you want to adjust the level, you can go ahead and add that system property and then set it to what the appropriate setting, or what is the setting that you would like to have it go to. So if you're having errors, you can enable this. And so then this is going to pipe all of the information into the error log itself. Let me just go ahead and show that real quick. So we have under here, it's on the provider side, but there's also the same module over on the consumer side is going to be the error log. I don't know if I have anything within this instance here. No, I don't. But this is where everything would be sent to that is Service Bridge related. So first thing that people are going to encounter is, onboarding troubleshooting. So I have a link to the onboarding troubleshooting. There's that master KB article that we have right here. You'll see this link down here. That's another related documentation to onboarding troubleshooting. This is the KB article, and it has a number of the different scenarios that we have seen that there are either issues with, or could be configuration or defects. And has a lot of information that's available. This is available for both internal as well as to the customer as well, who are logged in. Has a number of different scenarios for registration errors, for key exchange. We had in the 1.1 release, there was the change for the registration from the encryption method from a default of what was KMF. And changed it to the default being a Service Bridge specific encryption of AES 256. So this is driven largely from changes that went in from at a platform level. So in December of last year, there was changes within the encryption methods that are used to communicate between the instances, where previously when an instance talks to another instance, what it used for encryption was a unique certificate, but that was specific for the instance itself. In December, what they changed it to is that now the certificate that is used generating or communicating between instances is unique for each pairing of each instance. So it generates multiple different certificates when it starts talking to multiple different systems, which is a security enhancement, but poses challenges because the components that it needs to communicate and talk with that are in a ServiceNow cloud. And so when you get into protected instances, when you get into cloud labs, when you get into on-premise, probably Azure and AWS, we'll find out a little bit more about that. That's going to pose issues in being able to communicate with that. So the AES 256 that was built into Service Bridge for encryption within February, that removes the need for that data center component. That encryption method is really just used for that exchange of data only during the registration process. So it's really something that is in use for a minute or two just to exchange that information. But that makes the registration process something that is much less error prone and opens up the possibility to have it, as we're saying, within cloud labs and protected instances in a number of different places. So I would recommend, we would recommend going on, 1.1.0 or later for streamlining that experience. If it is on a previous version, as we saw within the onboarding document, there's troubleshooting steps, key exchange, that's a part of the KMF, is a common one that we saw, where the resource exchange request doesn't get approved. This drives off of that communication with those KMF components, decryption failed. So if it is on, some of the previous versions, then that's something that you can go in here and take a look at to approve, but ideally it's something that we can use the AES components. One thing I will call out though in particular around this as well, that was why we did as the first step is that we checked that KMF is healthy. Because with the OAuth 2 components for the first step, there is still a dependency on KMF. So we just do want to make sure we haven't really seen that be a major challenge. There were some issues. We had seen many releases before, I think prior to Tokyo, but haven't seen that, but still something we just want to check because it's one of those back-end components that's really not touched very often and can be tough to identify if we don't validate that the KMF is in a healthy state ahead of time. The other piece that we do see in here is that there are some modules like HRSD where they will go ahead and move a module into a default reject state. So this is this COM platform security OAuth glide encryptor. And so it basically sets this module to reject instead of track. And so anything that tries to use it gets rejected. And so that the processing of the OAuth record and that initial registration is something that would then fail as a result of that. So it's something to keep an eye out that if you're seeing it, if you're seeing this fail, especially know for sure if it's HRSD, but there could be other modules that might automatically adjust this within the system. This is something to check and take a look at even on the current version. So moving on, another issue that we have seen has to do more with configuration and customization of particular instances, but with vanity URLs. So within vanity URLs, there is a system property of this glide servlet URI, and the custom URL should be populated within here. And so then the OAuth, when OAuth creation from a platform level gets processed, it will go ahead and use the URL that is stored within that system property. What we have seen though on instances fairly commonly when it's working, especially in dev or subprod environments, when a customer does a system clone, this glide servlet URI will be set to the production URL. So they go to click on the registration, they go to hit the connect to provider, they hit authorize, and then it stops working. It fails, and that's because the URL is specific, for OAuth 2, and it's getting the URL for the production instance instead of the dev instance. We've seen a couple of cases where this glide servlet URI was not used for a customer with a custom URL, and something that probably dated back, many years, and they wanted to go ahead and use a workaround for it. And so there is a KB that details what are the business rules. And I think a few script includes that need to be changed to use a separate either property or hard code in the URL. And this is just done on the provider side for the provider's vanity URL to make sure that it matches up with what they're using, and that's specific to the OAuth 2 registration. And I feel like I either have a duplicate or I've already covered this. So moving on, onboarding user role. We touched on this a little bit earlier on why you have to do the impersonation. So we'll just go over this quickly, but the user on the performing the registration on the customer admin needs admin privileges. And so this is only for the setup. So this is the person that's actually going to click on the link that they received. They're going to log in as admin. They're going to have that connect to provider button. As we said, the actual user on the consumer instance and who is listed within the registration on the provider, they don't need to be the same user It doesn't have to be the same SysID. It could even be completely separate users. They don't need to match. The permissions on the consumer side versus the provider side are not related. However, it just has to be the person that when they click on that connect to provider, they need to authenticate to the provider instance as the contact that is listed within this registration. So that's a pretty common one that we see, especially when doing demos or when doing testing, when someone is managing both of the instances. That's why we would say impersonate the user on the provider side before you click on connect to provider, so that it has the correct user context. Otherwise, you will see an error, saying that there's a problem, and reach out to your provider because you are logged in as the wrong user. So onboarding stuck in an open state. And so this is where when you're doing a customer registration, and this is prior to 1.1.3, which was the March release that was released a week and change ago. There was an issue where if you use the contextual menu, you right click or click on the hamburger icon and hit the save button or hit save under the context menu, that it would get stuck in a open stage and would not progress. And so the save UI button is what you want to use in 1.1.3. That has been changed, so it doesn't matter how you save the record, it will progress accordingly. But if you're on anything prior to 1.1.3, the March release on the provider side, when you do the registration record, make sure to use the actual UI button itself to save and not the context menu. Otherwise, it will get hung in the open state. If that does happen, you can go ahead and delete the registration record because it's not actually going to progress and do anything. And then you can just go ahead, delete the registration record, create a new one, and then hit save on the UI button.
And for those of you who experience that, we are running 1.1.2 in the current environment. So that's why we had that issue today.
Cool. Next one is on role troubleshooting, and we don't have a tremendous amount on this, but the ability, we had a few people, I think, that brought this up where they didn't see it within the catalog. You need the SB requester role. Otherwise, you won't see the remote record producers within the portal. That is not accounting for authorized users / personas that might restrict them further. But as a user on the consumer instance, you will not see those remote record producers in the portal unless you have that requester role. That can be granted by admin or service bridge admin as well, but that's the role that you want people to have the base ability to see those remote record producers. There is the potential for other role conflicts or exclusions. I'd say just refer to the documentation. It has a list of what the roles are and what that grants them to, and if those get assigned to the appropriate groups, ideally it shouldn't be an issue. We haven't really seen anything that is, I'd say, abnormal, and it's beyond regular rules. Let me pause there because I know I've hit quite a lot, with onboarding, troubleshooting, error logs, and user roles and onboarding stuck. Any questions before I move on to sync issues?
So for the system properties, like to enable, like if we keep enable and leave it like that, does it cause any performance issues?
That's one of the things that is probably difficult to give an exact answer on. It's going to depend upon the volume of what the logs are that are coming through. I probably would not enable it. If so, see what the volume is and keep it on a lesser state, informational, not in like a debug side. Probably something you would have to see. Ideally, no, because it's really going to be something looking more for the error logs, but I'd say there's always the potential for it. So something I would probably enable as is needed. instead of having something that's on just by default.
Okay, and those are the same like common system properties for both provider and consumer to check like if there is an issue with the payload or anything.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, on the provider side, you'll probably have there's going to be some additional errors because there is the base ServiceNow or ServiceBridge app, and then there is the provider app, which is in addition to that, but still the same properties.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, so on to sync troubleshooting. So this is something I think we had a few of these as we went through today, for transmitting data between. So as I mentioned, it uses RPS to synchronize underneath. And then there is the on the consumer connection, or on a provider connection, depending on the instance, you will see the inbound and outbound. There's also a tab though where it says the RPS connection that will have send you to additional details. And so we have, for troubleshooting, the place I'd always start is to restart the connection. I'm going to say this is not always going to work. The restart connection, the actual function for this is something that will continue to be expanded as we add more and more. We really are, the goal is this to be the one-stop shop that you hit restart connection. It'll go through and all of the known error scenarios that we have, it'll be able to automatically repair those. That being said, this is going to be something that will be additive to be able to go ahead and synchronize repair. So would recommend to start there, with restart connection, but I know there are issues today that will not be fixed, if there is a problem with it, and I'll demonstrate one of those. So the next place that I would generally refer to go to is then look at the actual remote process sync connection itself. So underneath, opening that up on the tab in the remote process sync connection itself, you'll have more information. So you will see things, the same error state, is it active, on the inbound or outbound. But you'll also see there's this inbound and outbound queue. And so in the outbound queue, if inbound or outbound queue, whichever direction that the error is in, you'll see a message that's there that will give you additional information. If you have, fixed the issue, you can then put that the message that's in an error state into a ready state so that it'll be processed. Go ahead and then, save that record, or, just update it if you're looking at it from the list view. And then it will go ahead and process that again. And I bring this up, and I think I hopefully should be able to demonstrate that right now. If you're using a PDI environment, to simulate a consumer, that goes to sleep all the time. So you are going to have it. Actually, my PDI is not connected. Sorry, I was doing some testing. So can't show you that, but PDI environment, you're going to see that happen on a regular basis, that the error is going to come up. So let me just look at it instead from my other consumer instance. So if I go in here, I have this RPS connection. I'm going to go down here into the RPS record itself. I have right here, these are things that were happened today. I would see, this error info, or rather would have an error if there was a problem, and I'd be able to go into the status here, be able to change it into ready, and then go ahead and save it. On the PDI environment, I don't have the ability to show that right here because it's not connected at the moment, but you also have what we see right here, this validate and activate remote system. That's something that I have done before as well under the RPS connection. Again, especially with PDI. PDI goes to sleep every day, so it wakes up and now it's actually available. So you can hit validate and activate remote system, and then you'll see, that you still have the error that's in the outbound queue. You can put this into ready, save that record, and then that will go ahead and process it. So As I said, you will see this often if you are using a PDA environment since it goes to sleep. It should not be a common occurrence, though, in other instances if you have full dev test prod instances. So definitely contact support if you're seeing this as more than a rarity in anything outside of a PDI environment. So next one is attachment troubleshooting. So one thing to know, with attachments, attachments that exist on a parent task prior to the connection or the creation of the remote task are not going to sync. So there is a process that's going to look for those attachments, but it's going to be something that doesn't trigger until after a remote task is being created. So if you have attachments that are on a task prior, they are not going to be sent over. Same thing with remote catalog items. The attachments are only going to be added after the provider task has been created. Additionally, for Utah, patch 10 will need to be installed. And also there's some exclusions that need to be made on the antivirus scanning of that. There's a KB article that is specific for the steps that need to take place in Service Bridge beyond just the general challenge, which is from a platform level with the antivirus signing and attachments with RPS. That goes into what those steps are. So this is something, from a Vancouver, Washington is already been resolved. But if it is on Utah, they need to do it on patch 10 and also refer to this KB article as well. So remote choice troubleshooting, if you're having issues with remote choice, first off, check that remote choice is activated. It's possible to deactivate the remote choice, and then it's something that would not be available from the consumer side. Next is a quick and high-level test is disabling, account secure and glide secure. Not something that you would want to do in a production type environment, because if you were to remove that and have multiple customers that are accessing it, they might see information that they shouldn't. But if you were doing this from a testing perspective and are trying to figure out why something is not visible, this can help quickly identify where the issue is. A quick example is there's some tables on CSM that, based off of out of the box configuration, there's some properties and system properties to say that, okay, we will allow external users to be able to view this. And those imply some different ACLs on there that might not be readily apparent. So next, though, if you're still having issues, turn on the logging. And so in the logs, there's a query provider database. So that gives you the encoded query, so you can help to diagnose it. There might be no data that's matching the resulting query. There could be filters on some of the definitions, but this will give the starting places to where to investigate, what is that, and then you can represent that the encoded query and look up the table yourself locally on the instance. So on to remote task troubleshooting. So first thing is inactive remote task definition. So you will see some of these error messages on the remote task itself. So in this, where you get you're going to have an error status, there's not any parent, and that's because remote task definition is associated is inactive. So this could be on the consumer instance that they haven't activated that remote task definition. And so you cannot, it's not going to process the record over on the other side. So, on the consumer side, if you activate the, you activate that remote task definition, it should then automatically process that remote task and then create the parent records and then clear out that error status. Next one is then, this is a fairly common one that we see. This kind of relates to what I was mentioning, that the parent record has its own business rules, has its own data policies potentially. So if you're talking about an incident, there's things that could block that parent record from being created. And so the way that it has been built out is that the service bridge is going to bring down the error message into the remote task, ideally, where it's going to tell you what is it that caused the operation to be aborted. So if you have a business rule that stops it from being processed, then ideally within a remote task, you're going to be able to see that within an error message there. However, I'm going to put in the caveat on that, is that the way that this works is by proper coding or kind of best practice coding within the business rules to have catch and try procedures, so that if there is an error, that the it's going to catch the error, is going to pass that along. So if that has not been built into some of the business rules, especially when you get into some of the customization area, that's not always going to be the case. It might not bring that information in here. And so you might not necessarily see what it is that actually caused that. In that type of situation, that gets into more general troubleshooting of business rules and kind of testing to see what is it that's actually causing that. That's something I know from a support perspective, people are probably quite familiar with because there's some business rules somewhere that someone forgot about, or there was some type of exception that wasn't considered. And so now it's really troubleshooting and investigating all the different business rules or script includes that might be processing it along the way to actually identify what it is that's causing it to stop working. I mentioned an example earlier. There was something we're working with, and someone had a business rule that was based around emojis and was stopping the parent task creation of that, and something that they had to wade through a number of different business rules and script includes that they had on a very customized instance to actually identify what it is. So ideally, you're going to see what it was that stopped the creation of the parent record here. However, though, depending upon what the coding practice of that is, it's not always necessarily the case. And then we have error on the remote instance. And so error on the remote instance, if you're on the opposite instance, and you get that error message that comes through, that really should bring over an error message over onto the opposite side. So let's say you're the provider and the customer has, an error over on with their remote task. It should then bring that error message back to notify you over on the provider side that something has happened. Ideally, this gives you as a provider some insight of understanding what is going on the opposite side, even though the consumer might not be aware. So this will bring that over, give some visibility. The troubleshooting will have to take place over on the other instance, not on the local instance. Ideally, it's something that with the error handling, we are exploring being able to bring over more detailed information, especially as from a provider perspective, being able to help the consumer with some of their investigation. Excuse me one moment. All right, so this is one of the last ones. This is with parent task missing. And so if parent task is missing, if you see the error and this error message, basically means that remote task is not associated with a parent task any longer. So this could be, a parent task was deleted off of a system. Sometimes that is not something, ideally it's not allowed. Things just get moved into a canceled state, but we see it, the task will be deleted sometimes. And so, if that is the case, what should happen is if there is a parent task that did exist and still should be there, create a new remote task off of it, which will then kick off the process. This one, this orphaned remote task could be deleted. There's also an option to retry parent creation link to create a new parent task if it just wasn't generated and want to generate it now. So a few different ways on how to go about this, but this basically means that if you see this remote task, was successfully created, there was that association to the parent task, but the parent task was then deleted or unassociated at a later point in time.